So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of the Student Alliance Speaker Series from the Tigger House Foundation. Before we get into today's speaker series and introduce our very special guests, don't forget to follow us on our social media for the latest and greatest updates and happenings at Tigger House Foundation. So before we introduce our guests tonight, I do want to go around and do some introductions. I am Carly Dietrich. I am Tigger House Foundation's Addiction Navigator and Student Alliance Coordinator. I do want to share very timely today, actually, as the Addiction Navigator, I always share the work that we're doing here. I do always get emotional when I talk about this. I always say that just in case I break into tears or I can't talk. I had a mom reach out to me today. Unfortunately, she lost her son in 2014 to the opioid epidemic and crisis. That was her oldest son, and now she is dealing with a similar situation with her youngest. What happened was she went to his law school graduation. The family showed up all dressed, ready to go to his graduation at his apartment. He said, "You have to come in. I'm not graduating. I didn't go to class. I'm a mess." His apartment was pretty much upside down. And he's depressed. He has anxiety. He's drinking. And he's vaping. That was also a concern that his mom had because we think that all of these contribute to maybe cigarettes to vaping to pot, and pot to opioids and cocaine and everything that's out there. So hopefully he will go to treatment. He doesn't want to end up like his brother. He doesn't want to end up dead. And I just wanted to share that because, that is so important of what we are doing here at Tigger House. We're really navigating those to resources. This morning he was ready to go inpatient. Now he's ready to go outpatient. And then all the way to now he just wants to see a therapist. So it's a roller coaster, and it's a lot of talking to the family to help them get to what the care that he needs and the care that he's open to. So I just wanted to share that, kind of what's going on this week. And Carla, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Carla Scarabino, Tigger House Foundation Chief Development Officer. Carly, thank you for sharing those stories because they really help us refocus on why we're here. So, and thank you for working with that family. I will turn it over to Michaela.
Hey guys, Michaela Grandi, one of the ambassadors here. I'm currently an assistant director for a behavioral health service company where I work with kids with autism. It's good to see everyone tonight. And Mitch and Mr. Decker, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. I'll pass it to Allie.
Hi, I'm Allie. I'm a sophomore at Trinity and I'm a member of the Student Alliance. I'll pass it to Kira.
Hi, I'm Kira. I'm a member of the Student Alliance and I co-run the Student Alliance social media pages, and I'll pass it to Lauren.
I'm the other person who runs the social media pages with Kira.
Dan?
My name is Dan. I'm a junior at CBA, and I'm the co-president of the Student Alliance. And I wanted to thank our two speakers tonight. I'm very excited to hear what you guys have to say. I'll pass it to Nick.
Hey, I'm Nick Spinelli. I am a recovering addict and alcoholic. I'm coming up on 7 years sober. I also grew up with Tigger. It was one of my closest friends growing up. Currently, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Seacrest Recovery Center. And that's it. I'll pass it to Jamie.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm also in the process of, it's Carly's done moving, but I'm moving, so I'm in the car. But I was really excited to hear you both speak today, so I'm very excited to be here. I am a Tigger House ambassador, and by trade, I am a public health consultant. And I will pass it to, I don't know who's next because I'm on my phone. So Carly, I might need some help.
Yeah, Mike, go ahead. Good to see you.
Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Michael Boulos. I'm from Red Bank, New Jersey. I'm also an ambassador here. I currently work in wealth management at Merrill Lynch, and thank you guys for taking the time to speak to us. I'm very excited to hear what you guys have to say.
Awesome. Who hasn't?
I think we have Robert.
Hi, Robert. How are you?
Oh, actually, Tyler. That's Tyler, right?
Okay, Tyler. Sorry about that.
If not, I think Tess just also joined on.
That's all right. Hey, Tess. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Do you want to say what school you go to and all that good stuff?
Sure. I go to Mater Day and I joined the Student Alliance in October.
Awesome. Well, it's good to hear
Awesome.
you tonight. All right, so we're excited to introduce our guest speakers. They're very special to Tigger House Foundation. We're grateful and honored to hear from you both tonight. It's great to be with you, even though we are virtual. And for the students, Chris and Mitch are two extremely interesting people. I want you tonight to think of questions that you can ask them. I want you to challenge them and get to know them so that you can learn from them. They both have some amazing journeys to share with you. Chris Decker has been an assistant prosecutor with the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office since 2004. And I do want to say, go RU. If any of you are considering Rutgers, Chris is a 1999 graduate of Rutgers College, New Brunswick, where he obtained a Bachelor of Arts in Economics and Political Science. I too am a graduate of Rutgers from the School of Communication. Chris graduated Rutgers Law School in Newark in 2003 and immediately joined the prosecutor's office. I think he'll go into that a little bit more in detail. Mitch Ansel is a partner with the firm and chairman of the Criminal Defense Department. Mitch devotes his practice in the areas of criminal defense, municipal court defense, and municipal law. For those of you interested in Syracuse University, he earned his BA from Syracuse University and his JD from the Dickinson School of Law. So we want to give them a warm welcome. We're very excited to have you here tonight. And I will pass it on to both of you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm a proud Rutgers grad. If my office wasn't in like a constant state of upheaval, I'd show you some of my Rutgers stuff on the walls, but they just fixed my office after like 4 years. But yeah, we're definitely, I know speaking for Mitch as well, and we're very happy to be here. I've been a part of Tigger House for the last few years. Really enjoyed doing some work. You know, got to speak at CBA last year with Nick and Christian and everybody else, and it's always been a pleasure to be part of this. You know, recently Mitch and I joined the board for Tigger House. It's definitely an honor for me. I know Mitch he's on a lot of boards, but this is my first, so you know, definitely a proud moment.
Awesome.
Mitch, you want to grab the first
Yeah, I thank everybody for coming out. It's great that everybody's got interest, and we really appreciate that. I wish it was in person. We're getting so used to these screens, but you still never ever can take away being there live and in person and meeting everybody. So hopefully that'll turn around soon. I was Tigger's lawyer. So, you know, Carly, when you talk about getting emotional, you know, I think about Tigger often. And, you know, I knew the Stavola family very well, but, you know, I represented Tigger for many years, and I battled with him. I battled with him in many different courts all over the state. And I saw him get clean, and then sadly wasn't clean. And it was just a constant battle. But I think his memory lives on in this wonderful group. And it's amazing that all these young people are part of an alliance that can hopefully spread education and awareness to people. Because Carly's right, you know, it could start simply with a vape. It really can. And, you know, and Chris and I, you know, while we're on opposite sides of the courtroom, which is interesting, I think we both deep down inside want what's best for people and see what's fair and just. And Chris is a very fair prosecutor. Is this being recorded? Did I say that?
I won't tell anyone if it's not.
No, he really does, in fact, want what's right. And that's really important in criminal defense cases, because most of my clients and most of the people that Chris deals with have substance abuse issues. And, my job is always just as a lawyer, but it's more of a counselor and a therapist, and just trying to help people through some really dark times. And I think organizations like Tigger House can really help people, like the story you just told, Carly. I've heard stories like that for the last 30 plus years. I've been practicing law since 1988 and in Monmouth County, and always chose criminal defense as my area of expertise. I just really wanted to help people, to be honest. And back then, substance abuse was bad, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is now, and it's obviously gotten worse, sadly, throughout the years. But it's an amazing career. If anybody out there is interested in being a lawyer, it's a lot of hard work. 7 years of school and a bar exam, but it's so worth it. And I look forward to going to work every day. I don't consider it a job. It's a passion of mine. I know Chris is the same way. So we're both blessed to be able to have that. But I highly recommend, if anybody's interested in being a lawyer, to go for it, because it really is a worthwhile profession. So thanks again for coming out tonight.
Yeah, along those lines, obviously Mitch and I, we see it from different angles, but a lot of times we're really seeing the same thing. I deal a lot with cases in our office involving fatal overdoses. They happen probably every second, third day in this county. And, more and more these days, we're seeing extremely, extremely strong heroin and things like that. Basically, it's just mostly fentanyl these days. And, you see people overdosing, they come out of treatment and they have a small tolerance, and they come out and they're out for one day and they use a bag or two when they used to use, 8 or 10, and they're overdosing and dying because it's just so strong. But, in that regard, Mitch gets to deal with families the same way we do here, with victims' families who are looking, some people are looking for blood for whoever gave their, son or daughter heroin. Some people react very differently. You just never know. But I think the one thing that is kind of a lesson I've learned is truly that it affects anyone. You see people, like Tigger, and, a lot of our overdoses are kids from Homedale and Oceanport and, affluent communities. And it, really can affect anyone at any time. And it's just a matter of one bad choice can kind of lead down a road that, hopefully allows you to one day get clean and not wind up ruining your life or dead. But it's just happens way, way too often. And I know, Mitch and I had a case together that, we were talking about the other day, where we had a victim of an overdose. And, just like we do on most of these cases, we attempt to try to figure out where the heroin came from. And ultimately, it was one of the very tough cases to prove, but it was one of the cases where we wound up making an arrest, and Mitch wound up representing the defendant. These were truly a sad story. Two basically best friends who grew up together in Homedale. One ultimately gave the other one heroin, told him to be careful, and the kid passed away. They're tough cases to prosecute because, even in, I basically deal with cops a lot more than I deal with lawyers, to be honest with you. I'm the director of major crimes at the prosecutor's office. So, I'm kind of dug in on investigations more than most lawyers. So, we talk about the charge that we have, strict liability for drug-induced death. It's a first-degree crime. It carries 10 to 20 years in New Jersey State Prison. And if you get convicted, you have to do 85% of that before you can be paroled. So it's an extremely serious and heavy charge to put on someone. But we talk about it amongst ourselves, and it's like there are cops and lawyers that hate the charge. Some people think, whoever it is, he took the heroin himself, he overdosed. That was his choice. But, the legislature creates these offenses. And as a prosecutor, we try our best to determine, when appropriate, when it's going to be appropriate to charge. And sometimes I feel like I have to look at it as, if I can prove it and it happened, it's a charge that we have to utilize because it's there. We can't use it on one case versus another. I mean, a lot of people talk about how, unfortunately, a lot of the cases we make like this are guys like Mitch's client was. They weren't kingpins, they weren't huge, drug dealers who were pushing quantities and quantities of heroin. They're people that are able to get it for someone they know through someone else, but we always look for the case where we have the true drug dealer giving someone heroin and they overdose, but 9 times out of 10, the cases we can prove are a lot less, they're not as quote unquote sexy as some of those, we'd like to make. But unfortunately, we're left with a statute that tells us that if you distribute heroin or something else to someone, they take it and they die, you're strictly liable for the death. So, I mean, Mitch and I had a case like that, and it was horrible on every angle. And I think Mitch can kind of tell you how it wound up ending up.
Yeah, what's amazing about it, and somebody said it earlier, this family that my client came from was a very well-to-do, hardworking family, the Red Bank Catholic alum, just your average family, a family that you'd see in a restaurant or you never ever expect. He was an athlete, my client. He had a twin brother who was an athlete, football players, big, strapping, healthy guys, and they get hooked on this horrible drug. And as Chris said, the kid who died is his best friend. And his best friend, who was trying to get clean, was basically texting him, begging him to get him some heroin. And my guy, knowing that he probably shouldn't have done that, does it. And then, here's where it differs in terms of, the state's position and the defense's position. We believe that someone else had given the drugs that actually killed this kid, because they didn't find his body until the next day, like at 4:00 in the afternoon. And the interaction between my client and the victim was around 11 o'clock the night before. So he got the heroin, and our position is that, if we had to fight this, he did the heroin. He went home. He was living in a halfway house in Rumson. And we thought that maybe he got some more heroin that day, because that's sadly what heroin addicts do. When they finish what they're doing, they get more. And that's when he died. So it really, as Chris said, it would have been a very difficult case to prove because of the timing of it. And the state would have to prove the heroin that my client gave to the victim is the heroin that killed him. And Chris and I talked about the case for months. And I know Chris agonized over, because Chris knew that this was not this drug dealer kingpin. Chris knew that if the victim didn't get it from my guy, he would have gotten from somebody else, another, innocent person who had, I don't even think my guy had a record, if I recall correctly. But the saddest thing of the whole thing is that Chris and I, we usually can work things out, because like I said, we both kind of try to find the middle. In this case, it really couldn't be worked out, because as you heard Chris say, it's 10 years in jail. And my client wasn't prepared to agree to that. So we were gearing up to have a hearing, and my client overdosed and died a couple weeks before the hearing was supposed to happen. I'll never forget. I was in my office and Chris called me. He's like, "You're not going to believe it. Your client's dead." And I'm getting chills. I'm getting chills talking about it, because it was like I got punched in the stomach, because he had turned his life around, and he was actually in rehab. I think when it happened, he was trying to get himself well, and he was committed to fighting. He believed that it was, as sad as it was that this person died, it wasn't his fault, and he died. And I went to the funeral, and his dad hugged me, and he's like, "We tried." Like it's the saddest thing. You can't even begin to describe the pain when you see that on a father's face. And it's one of those cases where you want people to hear about that, because not only you get heroin for someone, look what could happen, but he ended up dying. And I can't tell you how many funerals I've been to of other clients, and this is not supposed to be a doom and gloom kind of night, but this is reality. This is real. And I've been to probably 5 to 10 funerals in the last 5 to 10 years of clients just like Tigger, that were good kids that just got hooked. And once you get hooked, it's impossible to stop. You either end up dead or in jail. And that's why I think this Student Alliance and Tigger House is so important to spread awareness and spread education and keep young kids from even dabbling and experimenting and, hey, this might be cool, let's try this. No, there's nothing cool about it. There's nothing cool about going to a funeral where the person in the casket's 25 years old. So I know it's a case that stayed with Chris and I. It'll probably stay with us for the rest of our lives, but it's just one of those cases that you never shake, you know. But it's a lesson for all of us. It really is.
I mean, the majority of what I do is shootings and homicides and things like that. And to be honest, those cases are usually a lot more cut and dry. And these cases are tough. And you have, Mitch has got his client and his family and their issues that they're dealing with, and then we're talking to parents and brothers and sisters and of the victims, and they're just tough. I mean, they're one of those cases where it's honestly I hate them. A lot of what I also used to do up until about 2 years ago was like fatal motor vehicle accidents too, and those kind of similar but different, but they're just tough. I mean, Mitch and I have had several of those, and you can never make anyone happy. Some cases they're prosecutable, but to be honest, I don't even know that people realize it. Sometimes we get criticized for indicting certain people on cases like that, but I can tell you the worst part of that job was always having to meet with families and explain to them how whoever killed their son in a motor vehicle accident wasn't going to be prosecuted because we just didn't feel that there was a crime. Accidents happen, and that's why we have civil cases and stuff, but try explaining that to someone who's just lost a loved one. Some of these cases, the hardest thing about being a prosecutor is sometimes the cases that it's there, but it's hard to really completely believe in. Like the person committed a crime, but it's just very difficult to prove. For myself, probably the most difficult case I ever handled was a texting and driving case that ultimately wound up being according to what everyone says, probably the first one that was ever tried in New Jersey, someone who was convicted of texting and driving. The lady, the defendant, was an absolute sweetheart. Every time I was in court over the course of a year and a half, 2 years, she couldn't have been more pleasant. Ultimately, at trial, they called a witness, and I recognized the name, but I wasn't prepared to cross-examine any of their character witnesses because there was no reason to. There was no doubt that she was a good person who made a mistake. And it turns out I saw the name and I'm like, I know a guy by that name. And all of a sudden the guy walks in, it's a kid I grew up with who had worked with her at a church. Now he's a state trooper and he was testifying on her behalf. It was like the craziest thing. But it's just sometimes, what she did was criminal according to the law. Texting and driving, I think for younger people, I'll even for a second consider myself a little on the younger side, even though I'm not really that young. For us is people text and drive and it's horrible. I sit at a light and I look over and, people are standing at their phone like this while the light's changing. But to me, it's like we've all done it. So for me to get over that fact, even and kind of prosecute what was a violation of the law was difficult. But then you talk to people if I talk to my dad about it, I'm like, I kind of feel bad for this lady. And, he looks at it as you shouldn't ever touch your phone in your car. And, it just depends how people look at things. But unfortunately, we weren't trying to make an example of her. It's just that for the first time, really, we could prove that someone caused another person's death by virtue of using their phone and not paying attention. She literally the lady stopped at a stop sign, her guy stopped at a stop sign. This lady was staring at her phone. She never hit her brakes. It was all on video. She hit the car. That car went flying into the crosswalk, hit a lady who was crossing on a break from work at an intersection. It's horrible, but, horrible facts, horrible case, but, difficult nonetheless from every angle,
Yeah, we're telling a lot of extreme stories, and a lot of the stuff Chris and I do is extreme, but I can give you an example of a case where it's not, nobody died, but it really hits home as to just how much this is a plague that really is trying to destroy society. I had a client once who was an 18-year-old girl from out west in western New Jersey, western Monmouth County, and her dad was a police officer, big, strong guy, and her boyfriend in high school became hooked on heroin. And my client, I don't think she even tried alcohol, and he started her using heroin. and he got her addicted to heroin, but she was so afraid of it, he would actually inject the heroin into her arms. 18-year-old kid. And what they would do is they'd go to Newark to get the heroin. And as sadly most addicts do, they can't make it back to Monmouth County. So they stop at a rest area on the Parkway. I think it's an Exxon there. It's maybe by Cheesequake. And people stop there and shoot up the heroin because they can't wait to get home. So the state troopers, they wait in the parking lot because they've been noticing that people are doing that, and they're sitting right there on a silver platter. But they arrested my girl, and the boyfriend was actually injecting heroin into her arm. And the troopers caught them in the act of doing that. And this father, this police officer, came to my office and broke down like a baby. His daughter was there, and she was hooked on heroin through no fault of her own. It's her boyfriend. And luckily, the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office really saw the case for what it was. And we actually got them into a program where they can get on probation before they go to court. It's called PTI. And she served a year of probation and then got her record expunged. And she went through treatment. She went into rehab and she came out clean, and she now leads a successful life. But, you know, if that didn't happen, if the cops weren't there that day, it could be a case like we just talked about. You know, and he could be crying at her funeral as opposed to in my office. So you really have to get the word out that it's not something to try and experiment with. And, you know, when people say, well, you know, pills, for example, you know, a lot of kids get hooked on heroin because they start taking pain pills. And a lot of times the doctor prescribes the pain pills. So the kid thinks he has to take the pain pills, and he likes how he feels on the pain pills. The prescription runs out. So what do? You're looking for that type of high. So you know, my son broke his wrist in 8th grade, and I said to him, "You're taking Tylenol, you know, and you'll gut it out," because they wanted to give him some form of a narcotic, and it just, you know, he was in a lot of pain. But, you know, sadly, you know, he knew I knew better, and at the end of the day, it was the right thing to do. But the point is, it can start that simply. So I think that programs like this are so important to have, and it's great that there's so many different high schools here, because hopefully you can spread the word in each of your high schools and continue this fight, because it's a daily battle, a daily battle.
I was going to say, I mean, if you guys have any questions at any time, like, we don't have a script here. We're not, you know, we'd rather be able to answer and talk about things that you guys are interested in or your friends are interested in, things like that. So feel free to jump in at any point.
We'd love to hear from you guys. You had about 27 minutes to think of a question to challenge these two.
Well, I got a question. Can I call on somebody, or that's not the way we do things?
Absolutely.
I'm going to call on Dan because he was eating Chipotle. So Dan, what do you think should happen to if my client hadn't passed away? What do you think should happen to him as his punishment in that case?
In the case where he
gave the heroin to his friend.
To his girlfriend.
Yeah. It was actually a friend. It wasn't a girl, but it was another guy. But yes. Yeah,
oh, the other guy.
Yeah.
So you
think he should go to jail for 10 years?
I would say longer.
Longer. Interesting. No record at all.
No
First
previous
offense.
record, but
we did.
I don't know the criminal justice system very well, but if you're injecting heroin into someone else's arm and you're responsible for what happens to them.
Well, it's tough to argue with that. In the case that Chris and I were talking about, he actually gave the heroin to him, and then he went and used it. It wasn't that you're kind of mixed up the facts of the case where the boyfriend and the girlfriend were injecting the heroin, but thankfully in that case nobody died.
Oh, in the case when he gave it to him and then he died, and he was like the in between.
Yeah, he died the next day.
And then he died the next day.
Yeah.
And that case I would say would be a little different if he, like you were saying before, that it's not usually like the kingpin of the operation. It's like kind of a middleman at some point.
Right.
So obviously that's a tough case, but I would say I think 10 years might be appropriate.
We did offer 3.
Hop in there as well.
Sorry?
You mind if I hop in as well? I agree with Dan. Being the middleman, if you really want to thwart, you know, the usage of these types of drugs, there has to be some sort of punishment for dispersing, drugs to people who aren't in need of them. So even though he has no record, maybe not 10 years, but 5 years, some sort of punishment to deter people from distributing drugs to those who aren't prescribed for them.
Well, deterrence is so important, and that really is the number one goal. When you want people to be out there, and a lot of these cases get in the newspaper, a lot of these cases become public because it's important for everybody to know, oh my God, I didn't realize I can actually go to jail for that. All I'm doing is getting a friend some drugs and I can end up in jail. And it's, hopefully if people know that, it would deter future conduct. That's the goal.
That would definitely be the goal, and I'll play the opposite of my position is, unfortunately, when you're dealing with people that are in the throes of addiction, I don't know how much deterrence there really is. The frame of mind is not always right. But I think the statute was created because there was a problem and they looked at it as a way to try to fix it. Only time will tell, but there's a massive problem. It's just, I guess the problem is a lot of times when you can prove a case, it doesn't mean that it's the most serious or egregious of that offense. That's the kind of the balancing, unfortunately, that we have to deal with.
Chris, can I say something?
Sure.
So I definitely think there should be some kind of consequence when, someone gets drugs for a friend they might be using together. I know of a case where a girl actually left her friend. They got it together. The girl died. She overdosed. She's in prison for 23 years now in Philadelphia. But I think there should be some kind of option to get the bigger fish and cooperate. And, if you're just somebody that's using, you're in the throes of addiction as well. I don't think 5 to 10 years is helping anybody in that sense. So, they should be given the opportunity to cooperate and get to the source, because the source is a lot bigger than just the one or the two that they grabbed for a friend.
Hey, Nick, you want a job?
Yeah, I do.
You could be my partner. That's exactly the argument I was making.
I don't know if I got 7 years in me, Mitch. No, but I sat in front of you when I was 19 years old. I got arrested. I sold coke to an undercover cop, and that was the start of a bad road for me. Thankfully, I got PTI. I didn't, have to go to jail, but I didn't get sober until I was 25. I was going to be 26. So, but I've been in a lot of those situations where I've gotten drugs for a friend. And, I think that if I was caught, maybe to get the person now I got it from, if I went to, Newark and I could, set up a little operation with Mr. Decker and we get, where the source is coming from, that would be a little bit more helpful to the population than just throwing away the kid that, was recreationally doing stuff with his friend.
That was definitely the argument that I was making to Chris, because it was clearly Chris knew that my client was not the guy. And we said, he was the middleman. It's almost like the game hot potato. So if someone else touched it before the victim did, at what point do you stop it? And it's a tough case to prove. And clearly, I guess the prosecutor's office could have tried to do that type of investigation, Nick. It's a great point. But they made a decision to charge my guy, and that's where we stood. But there certainly were bigger fish to fry in that case. Yeah. And it's a good point.
I agree completely. Nick, Mitch, it's definitely an avenue that we seek to explore on these cases. We're always looking to go up the ladder a little more. But the good thing is that sometimes I'm able to say, all right, like I've probably prosecuted in the last couple of years, like 5 or 6 of these cases, which isn't a lot, but it's probably like maybe like 1 or 2 other people in my cases, my office have even had one. And, I have to look at them depending on the level of the dealer as to what the plea offer is going to be. Mitch's guy was offered 3 years with 85. Obviously that's not time that I have to do. I always look at it that way. So it's easier said than done. But I mean, I had a guy the other day who was sentenced to 3 years he was dead to rights, bringing heroin to this guy. Guy got out of rehab the day before, used 2 bags, overdosed, and died. He wound up getting 3, pled to a lesser charge, which sounds worse, but to manslaughter, reckless manslaughter. So we were able to get it from a first degree, 10 to 20, all the way down to a third degree, which was 3 to 5, and he got the minimum. So try to use a little discretion there. I mean, the guy unfortunately still has to do a lot of time. I mean, it's still almost 3 years in state prison. So I don't take that lightly, as I'm sure Mitch doesn't. I mean, I don't know that there's people in my office that it's like, oh, this guy got 10, he got 20. Like, I never really looked at it that way. I mean, I've had people sentenced to life in prison a couple of years ago without the possibility of parole. I've tried murder cases where guys get 30, 40, 50. I never really took any pleasure in that. I mean, if I thought they did it, the goal was conviction. Sentence is up to the judge. I mean, that's really, I never really try to grandstand in sentencing and ask for the maximum, but I mean, sometimes it's appropriate. I mean, I don't know.
But you talk about 3 years. So yeah, so from a legal standpoint, when you're looking at 10 and you get 3, that's right. That's a home run, right? You save 7 years, but you got to serve 85% of your sentence in New Jersey when you are convicted of a violent crime. So, you think about that. There's no chance you getting out until you've served 2 years and 8 or 9 months. And it might seem like a good deal on paper, but to try to talk to my client who in his mind was just getting heroin for a friend, he wasn't, even though it was a very fair offer, he wasn't going to accept it because in his mind, he shouldn't have to do any jail time, So we were trying to get Chris to offer us probation, and it just couldn't happen. I think he would have accepted probation, but it just didn't happen. And sometimes cases can't be resolved and they have to be fought in court. But especially with COVID now, and I've got clients in jail. You come into the jail, you're in your cell 23 hours a day. You get out 1 hour just to get some fresh air because they're afraid of COVID spreading. And it's basically solitary confinement. So you get clients that do, 3 or 4 months in the county. It's not a big deal. It's a huge deal. It's basically 3 months of solitary confinement. So it's not something to take lightly, even if it's a county jail sentence.
I got to be honest. I can't speak for other people in my office, but I always try to keep that in the back of my mind. It's the fact that I don't have to do a day at that time. And, maybe I don't deserve to do a day at that time, but, you have to give that some thought because, 15 years to some people, some of these guys, they could care less, but 180 days in the county jail to someone else is a huge deal. It's all relative.
I have a question, and I could be way off base, but I've heard a little bit about the opioid diversion program. Does that come into play for either of you, Mitch or Chris, where you have a client that might be able to, I don't know if it's similar to PTI that you were talking about, but where they would be able to go through the opioid diversion instead of facing some kind of jail time?
Well, you talk about drug court?
I think so, right? Is
We
that where it's
also
offered?
Mitch, you probably know better than me because I don't deal with it, but I think we have some sort of opioid diversionary program for first-time offenders and all, through Monmouth County courts, which is, because drug court, like what Mitch is just saying, drug court's a big deal. And you have to be ready to do drug court because it's 5 years. And if you screw up, you have a sentence hanging over your head. So a lot of people would rather do 3 years of state prison than drug court. It's all about your mindset, because drug court's hard, as it should be. Nick could probably understand that. You have to go to court, I think usually 2 days a week. You're always being randomly tested, maintain employment. You got the judge and you got the probation staff, looking over your shoulder every which way, every day of the week. It's hard, so when people graduate drug court, it's a big deal. It's not an easy thing to do.
It's amazing. You talk about how bad this problem is. They had to actually come up with a court called drug court it's in every county in New Jersey, and it only deals with drug cases. You can't go in there if you have a violent crime. It's just straight drug cases. And usually it is like the last stop before you go to prison. But when you go into drug court, you basically sign your rights away. They can come search your house without a reason. They can ask for your urine just at the drop of a hat. You've got to come to court twice a week. And it's 5 years of them just being in your life. But I've had a lot of clients successfully graduate from drug court, and now they go back and speak at drug court. I've had clients die of an overdose in drug court. I mean, it's horrible that they got that far and then they couldn't do it. But I think what you're talking about, Carla, they did come up with another program, which is almost like in between probation and drug court, where it's like a little more strict and onerous than just straight probation, but it's not actually drug court. And it is available for people that have records, that it's possession. You know, that if you commit a crime of violence, or you're accused of committing a crime of violence, drug court's not going to let you in. So, but it's a great program because it really does rehabilitate. It really aims for that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about drug court, like Mitch has said too, we've seen that a few times. I mean, I've seen it over the course of my career. I remember years ago, Judge Chiat used to be the drug court judge. He was the first drug court judge in Monmouth County. And he was also like the primary search warrant judge. I remember one of the guys from our narcotics unit sent me a search warrant. I reviewed it. We went and saw Judge Chiat, and I had no idea that the guy was in drug court. I mean, it completely, so basically he's got a drug court, like person in drug court who's now selling drugs to like other drug court, probationees and stuff. And it like literally like ruined his week. I thought he was going to kill me. He was kind of he is kind of a gruff guy, a little bit scary at times. He's got a neck like this. But I mean, it ruined his day because, here's this guy who was like, he was the first assistant in our office for a number of years. And, really kind of like a hard guy. He's in like the short conference, Hall of Fame for football. And this guy was soft when it came to this. I mean, he really found something for the first time probably in his career where he had like this, like real, feel for trying to help people. And I don't mean that his career was bad before that, but I mean, it was just like this awakening type of moment. And he was so tied to the people that he had in front of him in drug court that it just completely shattered him when someone did something like this. And he took it out on me a little bit.
He was always a very scary prosecutor to go talk to, because you kind of were like shaking in your boots. I was a younger lawyer, and it was Mr. Chiat, and a very imposing man. And he was tough. He was really tough on criminals. But then he became drug court judge, and all of a sudden it was like a different person. It was amazing, the transformation. Even when you saw him off the bench, he was like, just like Chris said, like softer, but not in a bad way, like in a compassionate. And I think drug court, I know drug court changed him. And I think and I see him now, he's retired, and he's really happy. And I think he really changed a lot of people's lives. He was the first drug court judge. So, I wish something like Tigger House was around back then. Would probably save a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, that's the good thing, is that there's so many great organizations out there. I mean, I know a few weeks ago, the last time I virtually stopped in on one of these, we had Rob Carter from New Jersey Reentry, tells a great story, true story about his life and now how he's, working for NJ Reentry, and the kind of great things that they do for people who come out of jail and come out of probation and can't get a job because of, all the issues related to convictions. And, they help find people jobs, and they get their driver's license reinstated, and they pay off their fines. And it's all things that like really need to be done. I'm sure Mitch could say this better than me, but it's all these things that need to be accomplished before you can really get your life on track. If you want to get clean, but you have fines and you don't have a driver's license, and can't get a job, it kind of leads you back down to that, like, it's so easy to relapse.
Anybody else have any other questions?
I have a quick question about like how you are involved with the case when it comes to like cases where you have to like go up the ladder to see like how the drugs were passed from person to person. So you're talking about like how there's like at some points like a mediator, and it's difficult to go farther back to see like where the drugs originated. So how involved is the prosecution in those kinds of investigations, or do you just have to wait for like the authorities to?
Well, I mean, the way,
along with that?
so, like I said, I run our major crimes unit. So my unit is me. We have two offices. We have our Freehold office and we have an office in Asbury Park with 5 detectives and a lawyer. And then I have another lawyer who works in Freehold with me. So there's 3 lawyers and we have about 16 or 17 detectives, you know, some are supervisors. So we get a call pretty much on every fatal overdose in the county. And then we have to make, our supervisors have to make a decision whether or not we're going to respond. And we can't respond to every one. A lot of times, you know, someone's found deceased, you know, maybe there's some empty bags, their phone's locked, you know, because phones are kind of the biggest thing. So when we have the locals call us, some of the questions we're going to ask is, you know, are the bags there? You know, are bags stamped? Are there multiple stamps? Because I don't know how much you guys know about this stuff, but drug dealers usually stamp their bags, you know. The other, I mean, just looking at this one from the case Mitch and I had, I was looking at the reports before, the heroin was stamped Kill Bill. You know, you see Playboy, you see murder, you see, I saw AIL the other day. I mean, whatever it is, it's some drug dealer puts a stamp on it. And if drug dealers were smart, they wouldn't stamp their bags and they make our life a lot harder. But they do because there's like a branding aspect to it. It's kind of like, you know, heroin addicts, they find out that their friend overdosed, either fatally or non-fatally. They want that bag. They call it fire because they want what people overdose on, which is, it's crazy from a clear head to understand that, but they want the best of the best. And that's how scary this situation is. But if our detectives respond, one of the first things they want to do is we want to see if we can get into someone's phone, because your phone basically has your life in it. So if a guy got heroin 4 hours earlier, chances are, whether it's in a messaging app like Text Now or Facebook Messenger, or, you know, some people even use actual real text messages, but not as many these days. You know, you're going to see probably who or where they got the drugs. I mean, that's the easiest way for us to start making these cases. And then what the detectives will really try to do, if they can do it quick enough before the dealer knows that the person they sold to is dead, what they're going to do is the detectives usually going to act as the victim. They're going to start texting the person they got it from. Yo, I need more. Can I get another bundle? You know, can I get a brick? Can I get a couple bags? And they're really just trying to set up this guy to get him to deliver more there or wherever. And they try to arrest him at that point. Then the question will be, is the guy going to have the same bags or the same stamps as he just gave to the victim? There's a ton of things. And then at the end of the day, the most critical aspect in any of these cases is ultimately we have to wait for the autopsy report to see the toxicology. Because, you know, if the victim has heroin in his system, fentanyl and all the breakdown of heroin, but then he also is a, you know, 0.17 BAC, and he's got oxycodone in his system, he's got marijuana, and he's got all these things, our case is, as far as the strict liability, is going to go nowhere, because we have to prove that the heroin caused the death. But once we, you know, assuming everything went according to plan and that guy came and delivered, one of the first things they're probably going to ask him, you know, who's your supplier? And then the question is he willing to do the same thing? I mean, it's kind of basic undercover narcotics, like 101. I mean, just trying to get up the ladder, you know, because once you let time pass, you know, people's memories fade, you know, because one of the things, really the way that Mitch's client that we were talking about earlier on, really the way, I mean, I can say this now, is that our detective knew he had to interview Mitch's client. Mitch wasn't representing him yet. He didn't have an attorney. We knew we had to interview him because we had an allegation that he sold it. We fully expected that he was going to come in, he was going to deny it and say, I didn't give him heroin. And that would have been the end of the case. But ultimately, he actually spoke to the detectives and he ultimately kind of, in my mind, kind of walked himself into a charge. So, you know, these cases are tough and they pretty much have to be perfect. But I don't know if that answers the question, but it's all about trying to get cooperation, trying to go up the ladder, because we'd love to get the guy in Newark who's supplying half the state with heroin. That's the idea behind this. But unfortunately, I would say I have one case where we got a guy from Newark. But the thing is, even if that guy was going to talk to our detectives, he wouldn't have a clue that he sold to this kid. He wouldn't remember because he sells so much on every given day. And it's just, you know, it's just another kid from Monmouth County went up to Newark to get some heroin 2 days earlier, and he probably would never even if he wanted to admit it, I don't even think he'd be able to with any sort of specificity.
Yeah, that was one of the interesting legal points for, for all the criminal defense attorneys out there. They took a statement from my client, and they obviously advised him of his Miranda warnings. And there was a point in time where there was some question as to whether he actually wanted to have a lawyer present. And the questioning went on for a good number of hours. And Chris was very honest, without that statement, they really had a difficult case. And that was going to be one of the first areas of us fighting is, should that statement be allowed to be admitted into evidence? And there was going to be a hearing on that particular issue before my client sadly passed away. So that was all part of the case.
But I mean, that's fair point. We would have had a hearing, we would have litigated it. I know Mitch's office was prepared to do that. We were prepared to do it. Unfortunately, their client, while the thing was going on, I mean, he wound up going to Florida, and then ultimately he wound up going to a different rehab facility, and he was in like Houston, somewhere in Texas.
Yeah.
Where he, I guess they let him leave. And we all know how, unfortunately, the rehabs are tough. People get weekend pass, whatever the case may be, and they slip into bad habits. But cooperation's key. I mean, that's in what I do, and we've been talking about drug cases mostly here, but most of what I do is, gang-related shootings, things like that, and we're always looking for cooperation. The most successful case I ever had was when we had a guy wire up and get the most chilling confession I've ever heard in my life. So, cooperation's key.
Pretty amazing what Chris, you and Mitch both do. And it's really, really amazing to see you guys go back and forth. It's pretty cool.
Thanks.
Couldn't be a better, way to have this speaker series with both of you at the same time. Is definitely the way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, because, not everybody, and I'm not saying this because he's staring at me on the screen. I mean, not everybody practices criminal defense law the way Mitch, and he's not the only one, but, like some of the real reputable guys do. I mean, it's not always about fighting every single aspect of everything. The best way is, a lot of times, Mitch is going to have a client, knows the guy's guilty. He's trying, they're not all guilty, I understand, but he's trying to get his guy the best deal. And, being able to communicate and have relationships with people who know you, they trust you, you've never burnt them before, is really the way that, things get done, in life, not just in law,
Thank you, Chris. It is definitely a two-way street. And for the most part, most of the prosecutors in Chris's office want to get to the right result. They want to get to what's fair, let the punishment fit the crime, as an old cliche saying, but it is really true. And when you do it for as long as Chris and I have done it, you sort of know where that is, like, where this case should be. And you get there, and you do the best to help this person and move on.
no matter how good you do your job and how right you do your job, you're always going to have people complain about you. Right, Mitch? I'm sure you've had the people that are like, this guy did a terrible job, and I got people complaining to the Attorney General's office how we did the wrong thing on every other case. And, unfortunately, you got to do the best you can, and you got to stand by your decisions, because I think that's the biggest thing when I look at some of the people, in my office. Maybe they're younger, less experienced, or whatever, even sometimes more experienced. Is not a lot of people like to make decisions. It's not easy to do that, but I think you got to do the best you can, make the most informed choices, and you got to stand by them. Sometimes you're going to do the wrong thing, but as long as you do it with the right intentions, and you're not lazy, and you look into things before you do them. But I mean, like with police every day, I mean, they're dealing with like things like domestic violence, and it's like, sometimes you got to make discretionary calls, and sometimes you have to side with someone because you believe them. And Lord knows, any other day, that person you could totally have misjudged them. They can go back and beat their wife again, or kill somebody, or whatever. Unfortunately, like, you can't live in fear of that. You just have to do the best you can under the circumstances. Trust your judgment.
So I just have a quick question for both of you. When you were in high school, was this your dream job? And is this where you thought you'd be?
That's a
Mitch's
great
answer is
question.
probably better. It's probably easier than mine. Yeah.
I've come from a family of lawyers. My grandfather started this firm in 1929 and passed it on to my dad and my two uncles, who then passed it on to myself and my sister and my cousin. So I guess it was always in my blood. But it wasn't always what I knew I was going to do. I guess deep down inside, I probably realized I was going to, but there was a time in high school where I was not sure what I wanted to do. And I went to Syracuse, as you heard earlier. And in my sophomore year, I took a constitutional law class with Dr. Michael Sawyer, who was probably one of the most important people and influential people in my life, because that's where I kind of fell in love with the law. That's in that class. And I never looked back. But it wasn't until sophomore year in college, I took that class that you know what, this is a pretty cool profession. And I was blessed, and I pinched myself every day that I had a family that had a great reputation, that I was able to walk in and start working. You know, a lot of young lawyers that are good lawyers. You know, it's not just being a good lawyer, but you have to get clients. And it's hard to get clients, especially now. There's a lot of lawyers out there, and very competitive with the pandemic. You know, people's fees are going down because they need business, and it's a very rewarding and noble profession, but it's also a very competitive profession. And I was very fortunate to be able to have a platform that, you know, to this day, I feel very blessed to be able to do that. So, but it wasn't until college.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if I could really define the moment. I mean, I went to high school, St. John Vianney, then I went to Rutgers. I don't know. I actually didn't go straight to law school. I took a year off. I thought about I just didn't, honestly, I didn't want to take my LSATs senior year of college. I just wasn't ready to do that, I think. So I wound up finally deciding that's what I wanted to do. I worked at a pretty big law firm for a year, which was fun, wasn't criminal. It was mass torts and asbestos and all this stuff that I would never want to do now, but it was interesting. And I wound up taking my LSATs. I went to New York Law my first year, did well, and wanted to transfer to, you know, a little bit better of a school. Got into Rutgers and Cardozo. Wound up going to Rutgers because it was in state. It was like half the price of New York Law. Thankfully, it was a really good move by me looking back, 2020 hindsight, because my first week at Rutgers Law was September 11th. And I went into the Trade Center every day, walked to New York Law School, which is in Tribeca in Manhattan. So had I not transferred, you know, I'm not saying, you know, but I mean, it was somewhere that I would have been every day the year prior. So it's a good move. Saved me a lot of money too. But I honestly, the one thing I'd say about Mitch is, like, you know, when you're able to, as a young lawyer, it's difficult. And that's why, like, really, like, if you want to be a trial lawyer, there really aren't too many places where you can go other than the public defender's office or the prosecutor's office to actually get in the courtroom. I mean, I'm sure that, you know, I was probably the first person out of 300 people in my law school class to try the case. I mean, except for maybe a couple other prosecutors or PDs. But it's hard to get that experience if you want to be in a courtroom, because, you know, I mean, like for guys like Mitch, I mean, you know, you go to trial, it's a big time commitment, and there's no other way to say it than it's expensive to try a case if you have a private attorney. And, you know, that's why Mitch was saying a lot of competition too, is that, you know, probably like 97% of the people in Monmouth County are represented by the public defender. So there's not a huge book of business out there. You know, but Mitch Wan, you know, ended up getting a lot of that. He gets a nice chunk of that.
Well, you work hard, and like anything in life, no matter whether you're a lawyer or you're a car salesman or a plumber, you know, you do a good job for a client, and you're reputable and you're honest, then they would hopefully pass it to their friends. Say, you know, that guy did me solid. He was fair. And that to me is how you become successful in anything you do, not just being a lawyer.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much from both of you for sharing your journeys with us. If it's okay, we will share your contact information with the group. I know that, you know, you'll go back and think about what Mitch and Chris both said, and maybe you'll have some additional questions for them that you want to pick their brain on your own. So I definitely encourage that. Tigger House Foundation just really wants to thank you for your time tonight. I know I learned a lot. You really have me thinking over here. So I'll be reaching out. And I just want to say before we wrap up today's speaker series, be sure to follow us on social media. And we just, we really want to thank you. And hopefully the next time we see each other is in person. We're having our open house. Hope you can make it. We, thank you for joining us and talking with our students. And also stay tuned for our next Student Alliance speaker series with Carol Stillwell. All are welcome to join. And that's a week from tonight. So we're very excited and we look forward to hearing from Carol. Thank you for everyone for joining tonight. And if you got Chipotle, enjoy it. I'm going to. And that's it for tonight.
Thank you
This
for
is
having
great.
us.
Thank you so much. I found it so fascinating. And the one thing I want to say, both of you, I can see your passion. And I definitely see that you both want to help people. And that came out in your stories. So thank you very much. And I think our students really benefited. Thanks so
for having us.
much.
Thank you for having us. It was a pleasure.